Hello, Fitness is great. This is your video for history for Wednesday, March 3rd. March 3rd. That means we only have how many days left? Let me think. Let me see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it looks like about, actually, I think it's only like 50 or 60 something days left, so it's not very much actually. I think when I said 85 before, I was incorrect about how many days there were left. So we are looking forward to getting through this chapter here on the Mayans, and or this part where we're talking about the Mayan Empire. So we'll get started here. Another civilization in Mesoamerica was the Mayan civilization. Archaeologists have found traces of Mayan-speaking villages from as far back as the time of the Olmecs. The villages contained groups of houses surrounded by fields. Some villages had public buildings, possibly for religious and governmental uses. For about 2,500 years, the Mayas built farms and homes in the rainforests and the lowlands and on the high plateaus. The Mayas could get fresh water from deep sinkholes called cenotes. It may be cenotes, I'm not sure, but cenotes in the rich earth of the lowlands. Mayas cleared forested land and burned the remaining vegetation in a slash and burn method of obtaining land for farming. The Mayas also built irrigation systems for their fields, and so you on your chart, if you remember, I gave you certain things, information that you need for that, and this was one of those things where several of those things were up there. As the Mayas prospered, their population increased and their villages grew larger. By AD 250, Mayas dominated the region and built city-states. One of their great city-states was Tikal. Archaeologists believed its population was at least 60,000. Tikal covered more than 47 square miles. Between AD 250 and 900, the Mayas made advances in art and architecture. They used limestone to make sculptures and carvings to honor their kings and their gods. They used clay to make ceramics such as whistles in the shape of animals, pots for cooking, and vessels for drinking. They built public buildings, ball courts, limestone palaces, and pyramid-shaped temples with massive stairways. Writing and books. Mayan writing was a combination of words and units of sound. Thus, anything that could be spoken could also be written. It was not until the 1970s that the Mayan hieroglyphics were understood. Today, 85% of known Mayan texts have been translated. The Mayas made books of their writings. They wrote on long strips of paper made of the inner bark of fig trees. To make this paper, the Mayas pulled bark off the fig trees and soaked it in water. Then they boiled the bark in the water for hours until the fibers were soft enough to separate and be manipulated. The fibers were pounded together with wooden mallets until the material was wide and flat. The paper was then stretched in the sun to dry. The dried material was cut into strips. Each strip was coated with a thin layer of gummy substance for strength. Then the strip was painted with lime to make its surface white. Scribes wrote and drew on the paper with paints made from vegetables and minerals. When the strips were dry, they were folded in an accordion fashion and bound between wooden covers. The type of book that the Mayas made is called a codex. A Mayan codex was usually about 8 inches high and several yards long when unfolded. Today, only 4 Mayan books are known to exist. One contains observations about the planet Venus and charts used to predict solar eclipses. Some contain prophecies based on the stars and planets, calendars, and rituals. The books do not tell anything about Mayan history, nor do they give any clues to the fate of the Mayan civilization. In the mid-1500s, a Spanish priest named Diego de Landa tried to force the Mayas to accept Roman Catholicism. When the Mayas refused, De Landa had some of them stretched on pulleys, burned with candles, or tortured in other ways. He wrote in his book, Yucatan, before and after the conquest, that he had burned an entire library of Mayan books in 1562, since they contained nothing but superstitions and falsehoods of the devil. Afterward, De Landa realized that converting the Mayas would be easier if he knew more about them. He became a careful student of the Mayas and tried to translate their writing into Spanish. Much of the information known today about the Mayas of the 1500s and their ancestors comes from De Landa's writings. The rest of the information has been gathered from the artifacts in Mayan lands. Math and astronomy. The ancient Mayas were one of the earliest civilizations that developed the idea of zero. With zero, the Mayas were able to do difficult calculations and keep detailed records. Their math system was based on the number 20, unlike the decimal system today, which is based on the number 10. The Mayas made calendars similar to the calendar developed by the Olmecs. The Mayan calendar was based on the cycles of the moon and the sun. Their solar year had 365 days. The calendar was made after the years of careful observations of the sky. These observations were so accurate that the Mayas were able to figure out that the orbit of the planets and could predict a solar eclipse. The sacred round calendar included a cycle of 260 days of ritual, which ran along with the cycle of 365 days. These cycles comprised a larger cycle of 18,980 days, or 52 years of 365 days. Last page here for today. Or is it? Yes, it is. Mayan people, physical appearance. Historians today can use sculptures and paintings to infer how the ancient Mayas possibly looked. According to Diego de Landa, the Mayan people were about 5 feet tall and had thick, dark hair. The men wore long hair and braids around the tops of their heads with one braid down the back. Women also wore braids, usually coiled around their heads and held in place with ribbons. The ancient Mayas appeared to have preferred long noses and sloping foreheads. Some used clay to create a ridge from the top of the forehead to the bridge of the nose. The sloping head had to be formed early in life, so parents bound newborns' heads between boards until the soft bones grew into a slanted, almost cone shape. Historic evidence indicates that Mayas also preferred crossed eyes. Perhaps one of their gods was cross-eyed. To achieve this look, parents hung a bead between the baby's eyes. After the baby looked at the bead for months, his eyes grew permanently crossed. When they were older, the Mayas made other changes to their appearances. Most young men shaved the hair above their foreheads to show off their slanting foreheads and brows. They also tattooed symbols on their arms, legs, and faces. Many had their ears pierced. The men wore plugs and holes sliced through into their lobes. They kept adding bigger and bigger plugs until the holes were several inches across. In these holes, they placed discs of jade or shell. Both men and women would file their teeth to points and inlay them with jade. Mayas took frequent baths, a practice shunned and feared in Europe at the time. It's also shunned by most kids your age as well, and some teenagers. Well, teenagers mostly do, but kids your age and younger. They liked perfume, which is your secret word, which they made from flowers and herbs. Many men carried mirrors to check their appearance. All right, well, that's it for you today. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.